She went under the wheels.
How affected.
Welcome to Under the Wheels. I'm Matthew.
I'm Gabe.
And today we get spooky with The Haunting of Bly Manor.
And we're recording this on Halloween, so you won't be able to hear it until Thanksgiving.
I hope not. I hope that's not the case. Oh God, my fingers will bleed. I'm gonna try and get this out as soon as possible, but it'll still probably be mid-November. Let's be honest. Maybe we'll be able to subvert your expectations. We'll see.
Pull a Ryan Johnson.
Pull a Ryan Johnson. Pull a. I guess that's it, huh? He's the only one now. He's forever gonna be known as like the
subverting expectations guy.
Yep. I mean, I guess it's better than being like the guy who directed The Brothers Bloom, or the guy who kept putting Joseph Gordon-Levitt in those weird off-genre movies. Although I guess they were off-genre because they subverted genre expectations. So, hashtag Ryan Johnson cast. Yeah, The Haunting of Bly Manor is going to be our subject today. But before we get into that, let's just get into the meat and potatoes of the episode. Gabe, what have you been watching recently?
I've been doing a lot of like movie nights with the missus lately, so it's it's an interesting sampling of stuff. For school, she had to do a project psychoanalyzing some public figure. So her group ended up deciding on Marilyn Monroe, and she wanted to watch something Marilyn Monroe related, like having to do with her life, not a movie she was in. So we ended up watching My Week with Marilyn, and it's...
I've seen that.
It's okay. Like, it's fine.
There's one reason to watch that movie.
The movie, huh?
There's one reason to watch that movie, and you can just watch the scenes on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's Kenneth Branagh.
Well, it's just... The movie has a few issues. It's got, like, the stupid contemporary ADD editing that's everywhere these days, where, like, no shot or scene is given any room to breathe. It's just like, boom, on to the next thing, on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. So it feels like frenetically paced when it shouldn't. It's like this is some, like, you know, it's kind of a light romantic comedy, not a fucking Bourne movie.
Right.
You know, we don't need this kind of editing. And then the second issue is Eddie Redmayne. He's just boring and always dehydrated.
Hello, Marilyn. May I please have a glass of water?
Like, that's his performance in the whole movie. And then, yeah, Kenneth Branagh is just such a ham. He is so over the top. It's laughable.
You'd think it would be perfect, but like Laurence Olivier and Kenneth Branagh are completely different actors.
Mm-hmm. They don't even look remotely alike either.
No.
It's just, it's pretty bad. His performance is pretty bad.
I mean, it's like fan service. That's it.
It's
fan service.
Yeah.
That's the only reason he's in it, and that would be the only reason for me to watch it. But again, it's just there's no, like, they don't look alike. Their acting styles aren't similar. Like the only thing that's kind of similar is their mouth. That's about it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're like
lips.
a real nerd for Shakespeare movie adaptations, like, oh, it's Kenneth Branagh, who's famous for Shakespeare movie adaptations that he writes, directs, and stars in, playing Laurence Olivier, who did the same thing in the 40s. Shakespeare reference.
Yeah. Wasn't that clever?
That's it.
Next, we'll get Julie Taymor to play as Shakespeare himself.
But Shakespeare's like a wooden block puppet or something. And then Michelle Williams is Marilyn Monroe in this movie, and she's like... Michelle Williams is probably one of the best actresses in the world right now, but her performance in this movie is kind of overdone. Like, she tries to do the, like, super breathy Marilyn Monroe way of talking, but
she's not good.
It goes so
she's
far
not
it becomes cartoonish. Yeah, it's like she's playing a cartoon of Marilyn. Also, Derek Jacobi has a cameo, which is more like dumb bullshit Shakespeare references.
I'm I'm always down for a Derek Jacobi cameo, even if it sucks.
But yeah, so, the movie's kind of not so good. And the thing that always struck me as funny, other than Eddie Redmayne's face, is, the movie portrays Marilyn like she's so beautiful that she can just like shatter space-time like a anime character or something, Like anytime she walks into a room, everyone, male or female, their jaw just hits the floor.
Yeah.
And then like some of the women get like angry and jealous because of all the men looking at her. Mm-hmm. But it's just funny like how every scene with her is done in this really over-the-top way. But they're all just looking at Michelle Williams,
Yeah, I know. That's the thing that I couldn't get past is I was like granted, Michelle Williams, she's attractive, but she's not exactly what I would call like drop dead gorgeous. And even with all of the work that they do to like, they add little hints here and there to make her look kind of more like Marilyn Monroe, but like Michelle Williams still kind of looks like she's got saggy cheeks. Yeah. So it doesn't like, especially if you watch Marilyn Monroe movies, like the two, they don't intersect. Yeah. And at the other end, if you're casting her because of her acting ability, well, she's not particularly good in it. So
no, I mean, that's the thing. It's like I said, she's a really good actress. I think she just made some of the wrong choices on this one.
Yeah, I think everyone did, let's be honest.
Yeah, that's true. Also, like I was talking to my girlfriend about how like that it was just strange that, everyone is just in awe of
Michelle Williams.
And, Kenneth Branagh is like, Marilyn Monroe is the greatest actor who's ever lived. I am but a worm compared to her. And that also just came off bizarre. But my girlfriend made a really funny comment. She was like, not to be racist or anything, but I feel like, generally speaking, brunettes are way more attractive than blondes, except for Marilyn. She's the one exception. And then I'm like, Marilyn Monroe was a brunette, right? And then she's like, well, you proved my point.
Oh my god. I thought
that was funny.
One thing about that movie that so this is going to sound really weird, but like the whole idea that went behind all of the production design in the movie to me was really smart. It was really interesting because like listening to the costume and again, I don't know how I stumbled upon this, but like the costume designer was talking about how like, well, psychologically speaking, Marilyn Monroe always had to wear all of these gowns and all of this like really nice clothes, decadent clothing. So in real life, she probably wanted to put on the equivalent of like a frumpy sweater and jeans. And so we wanted to reflect that in her wardrobe and like show that. And I was like, you know what? That is like, that's amazing. The amount of detail that is put into the production design for this monumentally inconsequential movie is a little depressing.
That's the other thing. It's like, it feels so inconsequential because it's like, it's one of those really lame biopics. We were talking about different genres of biopic a few episodes ago, where it's like a week in the life of someone tangentially related to someone interesting.
Yeah. And it's probably trying to play up the whole like, oh, well, it's the repression of the emotional ideas in the movie is kind of the point. Because it's like, it's a romantic movie where the main character doesn't sleep with the main woman. It's all about this guy like fantasizing about Marilyn Monroe. And it's like, okay, that's great that like this PA who had the task of running her down has this romantic idea that maybe Marilyn Monroe had a passing fancy at him, but like even then it's a poor dramatization of that idea because again there's no real like emotional stakes except I guess Emma Watson gets to avoid having sex with Eddie Redmayne, which net positive for her. But like Jessica Biel wasn't as lucky, but the whole idea of like, oh well, this is like repressing the emotional, I guess the like emotional ejaculative explosion of the moment is just like, that's the purpose of the movie. It's like, well then choose something else because this is basically just like a bunch of like Hollywood white people problems to me.
Yeah, well, it's a day in the life of a wealthy Brit simping for Marilyn Monroe. And that's it. And it's like, I hate biopics that are like about someone who's not interesting and they're like one brief encounter with someone who is interesting. Mm-hmm. And then that brief encounter's drawn over an entire movie where they also try to like compress the interesting person's entire life into, or like the story arc of their entire life into a single, day or
it's like
week
a
or whatever.
flashbulb moment of their entire life, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's so frustrating. Like, if you want to make a movie about Marilyn Monroe, just make a movie about her. I mean, I get that, like, this guy, went on to be a documentary filmmaker, and he wrote a book about his week with Marilyn, and that is what then got adapted into this, but it's just like, who cares?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was that.
Last thing on that, if you did want to make an interesting biopic about Marilyn Monroe, you might as well just do a huge behind-the-scenes documentary of the movie The Misfits, because that was the last movie Clark Gable was in, Marilyn Monroe was in, and that was one of the last movies that Montgomery Clift was in. And so, like, there's a lot of interesting things happening there, much more than I have no idea what movie My Weekend Was with Marilyn was about. I don't remember it at all.
Oh, yeah, it was some Laurence Olivier, like, comedy of manners.
Merrily We Dance, featuring Marilyn Monroe and Laurence Olivier as Monty.
Yeah. So what else did we watch? We watched Borat, the first one, not the new one.
Okay.
Which is good. It's really funny. I had never seen it before. Yeah, it holds up, definitely. I mean, I'm a big fan of like candid camera style prank stuff. Not necessarily like Impractical Jokers or any bullshit like that, but like the Eric Andre Show, Filthy Frank, Ollie G, stuff like that. So Borat's a fun one. What else? We watched The Exorcist, which does not hold up in a lot of ways. Well, it's weird because it's like, I think a lot of this stuff that was like, The Exorcist is really famous for when it came out, people would have like these violent physical reactions in the theater where they would like, like newspapers are like, people are fainting, they're having heart attacks, they're shitting themselves, they're committing tax fraud, like all this stuff, like The Exorcist is so traumatizing that like all these things are happening to audiences.
Tax fraud. Reagan made me do it. Not Ronald Reagan, but Reagan from The Exorcist made me do it.
Ronald Reagan made me commit tax fraud.
Well, yeah, I mean, Ronald's like, no, not now. Anyway, yeah, sorry. Exorcist.
I do not recall selling crack to inner cities. Ronald, we didn't even mention that. We were asking about the Iran-Contra thing. Oh, what?
It's like Ronald Reagan's on his bed, like Nancy comes in and he just has like a cross that he's like, he turns his head all the way around, starts chanting things from The Exorcist. They're like, not that Reagan, damn it! Wrong Reagan.
But so yeah, like The Exorcist is famous for being like the most traumatizing movie ever. And it's not now, because like all the special effects don't hold up, the puppetry doesn't hold up. There's like the spider walking scene still kind of works, but that's about it.
So you watched the director's cut or the director's final cut or whatever? You didn't watch the original 1970s one?
I think I watched the director's cut. I'm not sure. Okay. But other than that, like the horror aspect of it not really holding up, it's still a really good movie. Because it is like a very interesting and very intense psychological drama. All the performances are really good. Especially the dude who plays Father Karras.
Yeah, Jason Miller.
Jason Miller, yeah, he's excellent.
Yeah, he's fantastic. He was a struggling actor, stage actor, and then
he was a playwright.
Yes, he's a playwright. Yeah, he's that as well. Yeah, he's the Sam Shepard School of Acting. I start as a playwright and go into acting. Not like Aaron Sorkin, who did the other thing. He went the other way.
But yeah, like the performances are excellent. The direction's really good. You know, I admire William Friedkin's like psychotic commitment to realism, where like he's like, oh, you know, we'll have like a 10-second scene in like a mental ward. Let's go into a real mental ward and just freak people out.
Yeah.
You know, or
I'm William Friedkin. We're going to shoot this scene. All right, but don't get any of the puke on me. I promise you that I won't get any of the puke on you. Make sure it hits him right in the face.
Yeah.
That's the part that like I feel like I've. But go on.
Oh yeah, or just like all of the, you know, the Spinal Tap and how accurate all the medical sequences were.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a really good movie, and then the exorcism scenes towards the end are all really gripping, even if they're not like scary. They're just very intense from a dramatic perspective.
Yeah.
So those are really well done. And then I always think of that, like that one brain imaging technician in the movie who ended up being a serial killer. So then William Friedkin made a movie about him.
Are you serious?
Yeah, so in the scene where the girl gets her brain scanned for the first time, there's a technician who's kind of got like dirty blonde hair and a blonde beard. So he's a real medical technician, and you know, he became friends with William Friedkin, and you know, he's in the movie doing his actual job because, again, Friedkin wanted to make this as realistic as he could.
Mm-hmm.
So about, you know, in the late 70s, this movie came out in 73, in the late 70s, this guy was found with a dead reporter in his apartment, and he ended up confessing to a string of murders of gay men in New York City that had been going on for the past, like, 3 to 4 years up to that point.
And then Friedkin made Cruising.
And Friedkin made Cruising about that because he was friends with this guy, and he felt really weird about being friends with a possible serial killer. Well, definite murderer and possible serial murderer, because it's still not certain if he committed all the other murders or if he was just confessing to them for the attention or because he was kind of confessed under duress or something. But
holy shit.
Yeah, so he made Cruising about the frickin' neuroscan technician in The Exorcist.
Oh my god, that's nuts.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. I knew that Cruising was about a guy who was going around killing gay men, and Al Pacino, I guess, is the cop who's trying to find him. But I didn't know that it was based off of a guy that Friedkin knew on the whole set of The Exorcist was like really strange, though. I mean, I'm sure you know all the stories there.
I've heard some of the stories. They're a lot harder to believe once you've seen the movie. Because it's like every demon exorcism movie has on-set stories of spooky shit that happened. Mm-hmm. But it's like, when you watch The Exorcist and it's very clearly a puppet flopping around, you're like, yeah, I don't believe any of the spooky stories on this one.
Wait, are you talking about the scene where Reagan's going back and forth on the bed? Like being snapped? That's her.
No,
that's
it's
Linda
a puppet.
Blair. No, that's Linda Blair. Yeah, the mechanism holding her down broke, and so she got whiplash from it.
Oh, poor
Yeah.
Linda Blair. Well,
oh my god,
so that-
poor Linda. Oh yeah, she put in like one of the more memorable performances. You know, they had the voice modulation, but my god, she had to go through the gauntlet to just finish the movie.
Jeez, it's brutal. Yeah, I mean, it looked like a puppet, which I guess is not a good sign if that's a real person.
Well, so there was that. There was what's her name? Alice doesn't live here anymore.
Ellen Burstyn.
Ellen Burstyn. She got there was a scene where like she's supposed to be kicked off the bed, and like the first couple times they weren't pulling hard enough. Ellen Burstyn was like, "Hey guys, can you be a little bit more gentle? I'm afraid of injuring myself." So Friedkin goes over to the guy and he's like, "Make sure you pull her even harder this time." and she ended up getting an injury from that because he pulled so hard. And just to add one final FU to it, that's the scene that's the shot, the take that's in the movie. So, like...
That seems to be a common thing in, like, movies from the 70s and 80s, is actors getting injured from someone pulling a rope too hard.
Yeah.
Because that was the thing on Nighthawks. Rutger Hauer broke something because Sylvester Stallone pulled a rope too hard. And that's one of the many reasons why they didn't get along.
Yeah, I would be pretty pissed off too if I got an injury for doing a stunt that's supposed to be safe. Like, quick aside on Indiana Jones and the Skull movie. Like, one of the reasons Harrison Ford came back to do Indiana Jones was he was like, oh, well, the stunt techniques are a lot safer now. And I'm like, my God, I would not want to have been in the 80s when they're doing those stunts if techniques are a lot safer now. Jesus Christ. So, like, yeah, and Friedkin is already, like, somewhat psychotic. You know?
And his sets are already somewhat unsafe, considering he just drove a car through the middle of traffic.
Yep.
For the French Connection.
Almost killing Gene Hackman and like a bunch of other people.
Yep.
Jesus fucking Christ, man! Like, have you seen To Live and Die in L.A.?
Mm-mm.
Okay, that's such a weird Friedkin movie. It's okay. I enjoyed it, but like it feels like he got a lot less money for as much creative freedom as he wanted when you watch that movie. Like, it feels like him doing everything he can with no money. So but yeah, the first time I watched The Exorcist, I thought it was scary. It's not quite as scary, but I think the tone that it sets with like the no music and sort of like you hear a lot of the room tone, and the editing is very slow and kind of like like waiting for the moment to develop before cutting to something else, I think works really well. But for most modern audiences that are used to things like It Chapter 2 and Insidious, The Lost Key, and Paranormal Activity 18, I think a lot of the things that made The Exorcist scary at the time are not nearly as...
I also think that because people are less religious and less like pearl clutchy these days, it's probably not nearly as shocking as it was then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially like when I first saw it, I thought she was infected with the devil, and then very early on, they're like, "No, it's not really the devil," because look, I threw regular water at her, and she was like, screaming. But I think a lot of people still thought like, "Oh no, she is possessed by the devil, Satan," and not Bazuzu from The Exorcist 2.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, like, the whole thing's a metaphor for mental illness anyway. So. Like, the whole movie's very, very obviously about mental illness.
But done through like a Catholic lens of like, see, you can't go to psychologists. You have to go to the Catholic Church. Something like that. Because like it's so steeped in like, oh no, we need to do religion. Science isn't working. It's like, I guess.
Well, I don't think it's that. I think it's more metaphorical. You know, it's just about like people who are, say, schizophrenic are kind of seem possessed, right? They're or extremely bipolar. Yeah. Which is adjacent to schizophrenia. Like, you could develop essentially a new personality out of nowhere that's completely unrecognizable, and it comes on very suddenly. And dealing with it, especially back then, could be very difficult. And then also, on Father Karras' side, like, he's got his own mental issues. He's very depressed, and has to manage that. Also, there's a scene in the beginning of the movie where Reagan starts acting kind of strange, and they go to the doctor. And the doctor's like, yeah, she can't sit still. She's very hyperactive, so we're going to prescribe her Ritalin. Just give her a bunch of Ritalin. And then it's like, the way he talks about it is a very 1970s way of talking about Ritalin. Because it's like, oh, Ritalin, it's this exciting new thing that solves the problem of jittery kids. Just give them meth and they'll calm down. And my girlfriend was sitting next to me, and she's like, Jesus Christ, these people are barbarians. And then it's like, like Ellen Burstyn's like, no, you don't understand. Reagan's different. There's something wrong. She's like her bed was shaking, and she's like pissing on the floor, and she's walking upside down. And then the doctor's like, no, just give her the Ritalin. It's like, no wonder kids are so fucked up. They're just drugged out of their minds.
I want to see the alternate cut of the movie where it's just like possessed Reagan with all of the cuts and stuff like turning necrotic and things, and like all of a sudden like Father Karras comes in and just starts throwing Ritalin at the demon, and like the demon starts getting placated by it.
The demon like starts focusing very intently. It's like, wow, you know, I could really get some studying done right now.
You're right. This is all I needed. Thanks, doctor and or pharmaceutical company. Ritalin. Like, oh, wow.
Thanks, the big pharma psychiatry
Big Pharma.
complex.
You just solved the problem of demonic possessions.
Well, that's the crazy thing. It's like kids aren't meant to sit still for long periods of time. So then as soon as we have like the industrial schooling process where kids are forced to sit and learn for like 8 hours straight, it's like, oh, you know, these kids, they're not sitting still. Mm-hmm. Let's drug them so that they sit still. It never crosses it in their mind that like maybe kids aren't supposed to be sitting still for this long. Maybe that's the weird thing, not that not that they're like a little antsy.
Well, I mean, like, so I knew this is like issues with education systems. Like, you know, back in the day, Catholic schools had nuns who would whack people's hands if their cursive wasn't good.
Oh,
and
yeah.
guess
No,
what?
my mom used to go to a Catholic school where she was beaten by nuns.
Does she have like immaculate cursive?
It's so immaculate, I can't read it.
Oh, that's too bad. There's this
It's like, no, her cursive is like, it's like the cursive that the Declaration of Independence was written in. It's just completely illegible to me because I can't read cursive.
It's just too beautiful. Your eyes can't process the glory and the magnitude of your mom's
like,
cursive handwriting.
It's calligraphy at this point, honestly.
My grandmother had like amazing handwriting. I knew another guy who had amazing, like readable cursive, but like to the point where I was like, you know, I should go back and like redo my handwriting because handwriting isn't that hard to get good at. I should really just go in and do it. But like that was a thing back in the day. Your teacher would beat you, and then it was like your teacher would sedate you, and now it's like, you know, maybe we should pay more attention to the kids. But now it's more like, you know, the parents will lecture the teacher about how the teacher doesn't know how to do their job.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just, throughout history, parents have embodied kind of an authoritarian, conservative posture that has produced every form of like inhumane or bizarre discipline, including beating kids for having bad handwriting and drugging them for getting bored.
Yeah. Heaven forbid the teacher is lecturing you about, I don't know, how plants convert energy, which I find interesting. I find a lot of the biology stuff interesting now. But my God, when I was 10 and you were telling me this is how plants got energy and sent it through, it's like, dude, no, just let me outside. Let me run and experience the plants getting energy for myself.
Yeah. Well, it's just, it's the ancient belief that kids their job is to sit still, shut up, and obey, that has been, you know, passed along throughout time in basically every culture. And it's only like really recently that humanity has considered an alternative.
Opened a door like, you know, maybe not all kids learn at the same rate, and maybe we shouldn't call them fucking stupid if they don't.
Yeah, it's like, what if there's a better way to do this? That's like that's what always bugs me is like, you know, I think we take everything for granted. We take all cultural and historical information for granted.
Oh yeah.
It's just like, it is what it is. This is how it's always been done. It's got to be like people 10,000 years ago did this, so we should do it too. And then you know, if someone raises the question, it's like, what if we consider other options? Not like commit to other options, but just consider other options. Mm-hmm. And then people are just like, what? What's wrong with you? You degenerate. Do you hate America?
Everyone, get your pitchforks. we're going to wage war on this person because they're asking us to potentially think a little differently about something.
And who knows, maybe thinking a little bit differently will actually reconfirm that the status quo is the right way to go. Mm-hmm. But it's worth a shot. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, just quickly on that, like Rob McElhaney was talking about, like when he grew up in school, he was constantly told to challenge and support whatever he was being taught. Like, you shouldn't just take everything you want for granted. You should challenge it and support your challenges. And I think like that is the best way to learn something. Like, I don't think it's a good idea to sit and lecture in class. Okay, what's your idea? I don't know. Okay, well then when you come up with that idea, why don't we test it out and see what the options are? But until then, it doesn't do enough to just be like, thing dumb. It's like, okay, fine. What's the alternative? Like, you want to challenge me on this? That's fine. I accept the challenge, but you can't present just,
it's true. You can't just like, the flip side of that is like being trolling or being pointlessly contrarian doesn't further anything either.
Yeah. Don't take Socrates, right? It was Socrates. Yeah. He was the one who was always like, oh, well, what if, but what if this happens? Although even then I would say that at least he would present like, this is the counterpoint of what potentially could happen. Like, yes, it led into analysis paralysis, but at least it's better than just like, no, you're wrong. Like, okay, well, why am I wrong? Tell me why. Please explain, and explain how your point is better. So.
I mean, Socrates was like probably the least crap out of all the Greek philosophers because he was just trying to ask. His whole thing was just question everything. Think critically about stuff. Whereas Plato is like, everyone after him is just inventing bullshit. Plato's like, there's a mystical parallel universe of forms, and everything in this world is an imperfect manifestation of shit from that world. Also, society should be ruled by philosophers because I personally think that I should have more power over people.
We are the only ones who are good enough to rule the world. We people who just sit around, think, and then get stoned. Not like stoned like with
drink
drugs,
wine and like,
my thinking about the world is better than your execution of how to proceed with the world.
Yeah, and then it's like Aristotle was like, humans are just featherless bipeds, and then Diogenes like gave him a plucked chicken and was like, behold, a man.
It's like bad performance art.
I know, but that's a real thing that happened. Aristotle was like, because his whole thing is like, we have to classify and organize and categorize everything. So like, what are humans? They're featherless bipeds. And then Diogenes just pulled all the feathers off a chicken, gave it to Aristotle, and was like, behold, a man.
No, everyone knows that a man is a miserable little pile of secrets. All right, so it's Symphony of the Night reference there. I don't know if you played that one.
What else?
What else have you been watching? Or did you have anything else on The Exorcist?
No, I mean, Exorcist is a really good movie. It's just not scary.
I still think it holds up as like a very good watchable movie. I think it won Best Picture, and I think it definitely earned it. Mm-hmm. I still think it's worth watching, like in the same way that The Apartment is worth watching.
Yeah,
maybe The Apartment's a little bit more entertaining in some respects.
The other movie I saw recently that has definitely not lost any of its ability to be shocking or horrifying is Blue Velvet. Like, I saw it a long time ago when I was probably too young to see it, and I wasn't all that keen on it back then. I was like, this movie's weird. But watching it again, I think it's amazing. It's really lush and beautiful to look at, but at the same time, like, the content of the movie is so incredibly like depraved and disturbing. Dennis Hopper, I mean, all the performances are really good, but Dennis Hopper is just incredible because he's committed to the most psychopathic like character ever put on screen. Yeah. Who just screams insanely all the time, and like he can say like there's a scene where he is singing along to In Dreams by Roy Orbison. And he makes he just fills every line with psychotic menace. And he's like threatening Kyle MacLachlan with a Roy Orbison song, and it's amazing and weird at the same time. But like, I mean, all the performances are good. Isabella Rossellini does a good job. Kyle MacLachlan does a good job. Laura Dern does a good job. And it's also interesting because it's like, I'm a huge fan of Twin Peaks, and Blue Velvet in some ways almost seems like a dry run for Twin Peaks because it's about a lot of the same ideas. Like, it's about kind of the things that are hidden in American life, like the horrors that go on behind closed doors in the everyday world. And yeah, it's a great movie.
I haven't seen, so I've aside from two episodes of Twin Peaks, I've actually never watched any David Lynch. To my dying shame. Yeah, I always wonder what a good jumping off point is, but I also know that it's going to be like, it's going to be an experience. But I respect the guy a lot. My only Blue Velvet story is when Dennis Hopper died. My friends wanted to celebrate Dennis Hopper's life, and instead of going to something like Easy Rider or another movie he was in that he starred in or that he controlled, they were like, we're watching Blue Velvet. I was like, all right, there you go.
They didn't want to watch The Last Picture Show or whatever? Or the last movie?
They didn't want to watch Swing Vote. No. They were just like, Blue Velvet, put it on, done. And they're just like, yes, dude, that is the Dennis Hopper experience right there.
Well, Dennis Hopper directed a movie called The Last Movie.
Did he? How long ago was that?
1971. But it's like an avant-garde movie. It's about a guy who goes to Peru to direct a like Billy the Kid movie, and then like everything just goes to hell. Dennis Hopper he wrote and directed the movie and starred in it. He's a stunt coordinator in charge of horses on a western being shot in Peru. Following a tragic incident on the set where an actor is killed in a stunt, he decides to quit the movie business and stay in Peru with a local woman. He thinks he has found paradise, but is soon called in to help in a bizarre incident. The Peruvian natives are quote-unquote filming their own movie with quote-unquote cameras made of sticks and acting out real Western movie violence because they don't understand that movies are fake. But I would say Dennis a good Hopper. Jumping off, like if you want to see a movie that's just David Lynch in a nutshell, but isn't like too weird or too big of a time commitment, probably watch Blue Velvet.
Okay.
Eraserhead may be too strange because it's older and more experimental.
Mm-hmm.
Mulholland Drive is about as normal as Blue Velvet, but it's just really long. It's like 2.5 hours.
Oh. Okay.
And then Wild at Heart is amazing, but it's not the Lynchiest movie.
Well, see, I was gonna queue up Dune, but wait, I feel like I've heard of Wild at Heart. Isn't that like about a country western singer or something?
No, Wild at Heart is about.
Oh, it's Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern are criminals on the run. It's basically, what do you call it? It's basically Natural Born Killers, but like 3 years before Natural Born Killers came out. And also it's David Lynch's Natural Born Killer.
I was gonna say it's a better version of Natural Born Killers.
Basically, so David Lynch actually has like this intense hatred of Oliver Stone because he believes that Oliver Stone stole Natural Born Killers from Wild at Heart.
I can believe that. It's apparently the script that Tarantino wrote for Natural Born Killers is nothing like the movie that actually ended up on screen.
That's not surprising.
Yeah, like even for Oliver Stone I think Tarantino has a story by credit, but that's it. He did they just completely ejected the entire screenplay, got someone else in there. And again, the only reason I even dabbled with Natural Born Killers was because I was. Like, it was after I'd watched Iron Man, I was like, oh, I'm big into Robert Downey Jr. I'll watch Chaplin. I'll watch this. And watching it with an Australian accent is always really funny. So I was like, okay, cool. But I never finished it. I was just like, this This is too weird. This is too out there,
Oh,
Oliver Stone. You need to
and Wild at
stop
Heart-
doing coke.
Wild at Heart also has one of the greatest Willem Dafoe performances ever. Or he plays a dangerous criminal named Bobby Peru. Who has really weird fake teeth.
The cast for this is just super stacked because super stacked with weird people because you've got like Nicolas Cage, Willem Dafoe, Crispin Glover, like Laura Dern's always, she's good, she's always solid. Diane Ladd, okay, Isabella Rossellini, Harry Dean Stanton. It's like, all right, nice. This is a fun cast. This is a good cast.
Yep.
Some
And
fun
it's because it was
Joel
made
Fenn.
while Twin Peaks was on TV. So it's got like half the cast of Twin Peaks in it too.
Was this before he was fired or after he was fired off of Twin Peaks?
This is before he was fired.
Okay, all right, okay. And then brought back at the end to try and turn it around quickly.
Yep.
We made a mistake. Yeah, you're right. You idiots. You did make a mistake. You shouldn't fire the guy. I don't care how weird you think it's getting.
Yeah, Bob
way to
Iger,
go.
then head of ABC Television in the late 1980s and early 1990s. You made a huge mistake.
I mean, Bob. Yeah.
Fuck Bob Iger. Fuck that guy.
Exactly.
Exactly. Just fuck him.
Fuck Bob Iger. I don't want to hear how he brought back the Imagineers to Disney. I don't give two shits. Fuck you, Bob Iger. I don't care how you like. In a way, he single-handedly has done more to accelerate the complete and utter demise of the theatrical viewing experience than any other person on the planet, except for maybe James Cameron. But
Well, there's a
different
great
story.
clip of David Lynch on the Letterman show, and Lynch asks the audience to sign a petition to keep Twin Peaks on
the air.
TV. And he mentions Bob Iger by name. He's like, yes, the head of ABC Television, Bob Iger, does not wish to keep Twin Peaks on TV. Please write him a letter or give him a phone call if you love the show, saying that you would like more of it. And then Letterman's like, I have no idea who this Bob Iger guy is, but he sounds like an asshole.
Oh my god! I wonder if that's hilarious. I'm not even gonna say what I'm gonna. That's great. That's great. Also, I'm always down for more Gabe impressions of people who have very funny sounding cadences and speech patterns. I'm gonna one of these days I'm gonna put a supercut together.
Oh, David Lynch is like one of the funniest speech patterns I've ever heard.
Oh yeah, he's great. Oh, I started What Jack Saw. That's the other.
Oh,
David
nice.
Lynch thing. I started it, but I didn't finish it. I was like, oh, okay, I'll start this, and then something happened. I was like, I gotta go away, so I need to come back to that. Get my Lynch on.
Ready to talk about Bly Manor?
I am ready to talk about Bly Manor.
Okay. How much Mike Flanagan stuff have you seen?
Okay, so that's a good question. And also, Bly Manor, I feel, is, I'm going to say Mike Flanagan light. But to answer your question, I have seen Gerald's Game.
Okay.
Yeah. What
But
about
not
you?
like Hill House. Okay. So I know Austin's seen a bunch of Mike Flanagan stuff, and I was asking him, like, do you think this is I have not seen anything by Mike Flanagan.
Oh,
So
you
it's
haven't
like-
even seen... Okay.
I've seen nothing. So I was like, is this kind of... I know Austin's a huge fan of him, so I was like, is this kind of a fair representation of what his other stuff is like? And Austin's like, not really. And then I looked into it, and Mike Flanagan's barely involved
Yeah,
with
he
the
directed
show.
the first episode.
Yeah, and that's it. I'm like, oh, well, that's disappointing. I wanted this to be my entry point into the Mike Flanagan verse, but I guess not.
Okay,
I mean,
so-
his wife and a bunch of other people he works with are in it, but that's
Yep.
about it.
So it's interesting because like, I was wondering how much experience you had. I was wondering if you had watched Hill House and things like that as well.
Oh.
I really liked Gerald's Game. I did want to see Doctor Sleep, but I never got around to it. So like I think he's a good director, personally. I personally think Mike Flanagan's a good director, and I think if you watch that first episode of Bly Manor, you get a real sense of Mike Flanagan as a director.
Yeah.
But after that, it's interesting that Austin said that he felt like it wasn't him, because I was wondering if it felt like a bunch of directors attempting to ape off of him.
Well, what Austin said was Bly Manor is feels a lot more generic TV than The Haunting of Hill House. He said The Haunting of Hill House has Mike Flanagan's fingerprints all over it, and this doesn't.
Especially as it got farther and further into the movie, into the series, I felt it not quite like what I was used to in Gerald's game. So, I guess that's a good way of prefacing because I'm very curious because I just finished it this morning, so I'm coming off of it fresh, and I'm gonna try not. What do you want to do a summary of it, or do you want to say what you feel about it?
So it's fine. That's my rating.
Oh, okay.
It's fine.
All right.
It's based on The Turn of the Screw, which is like the most famous ghost story ever. But what's
Most
interesting,
overdone ghost story ever.
well, that too. But the reason why The Turn of the Screw is so famous is because it's so minimalist. So as a story, like you get no information. You only get what's happening right now, and then everything else is implied. So you don't really know who the ghosts are. You don't really know what's happening. It's all implication and illusion and left for you to guess. And there's multiple mutually contradicting interpretations of what is going on in The Turn of the Screw. So right off the bat, when they say the turn of the screw in the first episode of Bly Manor, I found that irritating. But everything in the show is a mixed bag, it seems like. The performances are a mixed bag. Like, some are good, some are not so good, but almost all of them are okay. They're just good in parts and bad in other parts.
Yeah,
There's freaking Henry Wingrave's awful British accent. Like you can just like the first scene he's in, it's like, oh, this guy's American, but he's playing a British person.
I loved Henry Thomas's accent in this. I don't care what you say. I loved Henry Thomas in this 100%. I was all in on Henry Thomas in this.
And then it's like, I mean, it starts off, kind of spooky. There's some nice little atmospheric moments that are like, ooh, this is creepy. I wonder what's going to happen. And the faceless ghost, the Lady of the Lake, who's not in the original story, is pretty menacing. The other ghosts are less menacing. That's the other thing too. The horror direction in the first episode is way better than the horror direction in all the other episodes.
Yeah, one of my notes is this show is not particularly scary.
The show in general is not particularly scary, but the first episode,
it's very atmospheric.
Episode is very atmospheric, and it's about as scary as all 8 other episodes combined. It has like the same amount of scare value. It's weird how plot lines just kind of come up and then get dropped, like the main character's fiance.
Yeah. How that gets resolved. In general.
Yeah, how that gets resolved.
I agree with that. The only other one that I can think of is the money.
Yeah, how everything is like explained to death. Like a lot of things that may be better off left to the imagination get explained to death. Things that are very obvious get made into these big dramatic reveals that are less dramatic because they're obvious.
I'm curious about those because the only one I can think of is the one at the very end, which we'll get into spoilers later. But that's the only one that I can think of that's like it was a very obvious reveal, and I was sort of like,
yeah,
okay, that was overdone.
And then like the jumping back and forth in time for the ghosts and stuff got really annoying really quickly because it just felt like a collection of prestige television tropes sort of dumped into a box without really knowing why they're tropes or why they work, or maybe even if they did know why, just not putting in the oomph necessary to make them really work or make them feel the way they should feel, interesting
Yeah.
or cool or
Well-
dramatic or scary or whatever.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time, a lot of the techniques they used to either create drama or create tension just felt kind of flat. It felt like, oh yeah, I could imagine myself in the writer's room with someone drawing this on a whiteboard, I wasn't in the moment, which is not a good thing.
Okay. I've thoughts on that too, but
Okay. The other beef I have is the show looks like every other Netflix production, where it's like everything is very kind of soft and orange and blue all the time.
okay, that's where I'm going to disagree with you. But go ahead, keep going.
The look of the show isn't particularly captivating.
Yeah, that's-
either visually or
I thought
editing wise.
I loved the lighting in the show. I love
the soft glow of
I
everything.
love the soft glow of everything.
It had that Ford v Ferrari look.
It's that was a very me thing. It's like I like the soft glow. I think I was wondering if it had to do with the cameras or if it was just overly color corrected. But
I think
like
it was
the soft
overly
glow.
color corrected.
I like the fact that there's a lot of detail in, like, you can see a lot of their features in sharpness, but it's still a little bit hazy, kind of dreamlike.
Yeah.
Also, it makes me think I know one other thing that I really liked that I think now that I've heard you talk about it, I think I know exactly where you're gonna go on this other coin flip. But the colors, I don't think they were really like blue and orange, although all of their, like, the boys' skin tone just looked completely off the entire movie. Like they had to go in and hand paint his skin on there. But I disagree with you as far as like the visual
Okay.
language of the show. I think I liked a lot. But go ahead, keep going.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess let me try and give an idea of what the premise of the show is.
Okay.
So, The Turn of the Screw is a story about someone telling a story that they heard or of someone they knew about an American woman who goes to England to serve as the governess for two young, wealthy kids in their country estate. And this is Henry James wrote the story, and Henry James's stories are always about Americans in Europe and the difference between America and Europe in like 1900. So ostensibly, Turn of the Screw is about the same stuff. But anyway, American woman is the governess for a pair of rich brats in England. The manor is, their parents have died and their home is overseen by their uncle, who doesn't really give a shit about them, never talks to them. Whenever she tries to communicate with the uncle, he doesn't really communicate back. She starts to notice a pair of ghosts on the premises, a man and a woman. She also finds out that two of the staff of the house died at some point in the past. The kid's previous governess, and then a man named Peter Quint. And then the kids start acting strangely. They seem to be aware of the ghosts, and they also start like developing alternate personalities. And then the governess is confused and not sure what to do, and there ends up being some big confrontation where she sends the daughter away to her uncle, and the boy ends up she ends up confronting the boy and the ghost of Peter Quint. Peter tries to come after the boy, and the governess shields him from the ghost. The ghost disappears, and then the boy dies suddenly, and then that's the end.
Yeah.
Nothing is explained beyond really what I've just said. The rest is all left to your imagination, or to your kind of picking at the clues left in the text. This story, Bly Manor, is kind of like that, but way more overblown and complicated.
It's
So,
loosely based on the turning of the screws and a handful of other Henry Thomas books.
Henry James.
Henry James, not Henry
Yeah.
Thomas.
So
Henry
in
Thomas
this,
and
there's
Henry James is the turning of the screw.
there's a faceless ghost who lives in the lake. There's a dollhouse full of like totems of random historical figures who are also ghosts that haunt this house, and Peter Quint and the ghost of the woman have these really elaborate backstories, and everyone has a really elaborate backstory. Even characters who I really don't care about have elaborate backstories. And the uncle is way more involved in the story, and he has an evil fucking Twin Peaks style doppelganger, who's way worse of an actor than the real uncle is.
It's the same guy. It's Henry Thomas playing both roles.
I know, but I'm saying his performance is way worse.
I loved it. 100%. I'm telling you, dude. I was all in anytime Henry Thomas appeared on screen. I was all in. I was like, this is my jam. Maybe because it was really hokey and his accent was...
Oh, it's so hokey.
It was a very...
Henry Thomas plays their uncle, who, is not really a factor in the original story. In this, he's detached from their life, but because he feels guilty about a bunch of shit, because he has an elaborate backstory like everyone else. And then part of his elaborate backstory is he has an evil ghost version of himself that haunts his office. And his ghost version always has the worst, just shit-eating grin all the time. And I thought it was I'm super evil. Give me some more whiskey, you bastard. You're a terrible person, and I'm here to remind you of how terrible you are. And then, Henry Thomas is like, no, please, I'm not so bad. I just made some mistakes.
Pick up the phone, Henry Thomas. You need to answer it. You have to answer the phone, Henry Thomas. Fuck, dude, I loved that shit.
Bad.
Was it scary? So no. Was it entertaining as hell for me? Yes.
But it's entertaining for the wrong reason.
Yes. But also, as soon as Henry Thomas showed up with a goofy British accent, I was not going to be able to take him as a character seriously. But, I'll talk about Henry Thomas later. Go on.
No, I mean, I think I've set this up about as well as I could. So if you want to just start rebutting anything or getting more into spoilers,
yeah.
You can.
So here's where we're going to diverge, because I think there's a lot of prestige television things in the show, granted.
Yes.
So I haven't watched a lot of prestige television over the years as much as I would have liked. I watched Watchmen, which I thought was really good. But there was
so you watched The Watchmen.
I watch The Watchmen. Watching The Watchmen.
You get the joke, right?
The Watchmen, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's who watches The Watchmen?
Matthew watches the... Yeah.
Matthew watches The Watchmen. Finally, the question's been answered.
That's the Zack Snyder version. Like the Zack Snyder version where Rorschach's Bible blew up the entire world, and it wasn't just some tawdry trash on Breitbart. Yeah, that's the answer. Is Matthew watches The Watchmen in the Zack Snyder Watchmen world. You're gonna groan. You're gonna groan when I say this, but I thought that the show was a high witness, and it made me really want to watch. It made me really want to watch The Haunting of Hill House to see how it was different. But I think I thought that all of the horror elements in the movie were dumb. To be honest,
they kind of were.
It reminded me a lot of, and this is the other thing I'll say. It reminded me a lot of Crimson Peak. And if you want a similar experience...
Oh, yeah, it does.
If you want a similar experience without devoting 9 hours of your life to this show in 1 week, like I had to make sure that I watched the whole thing so we can record this, just go watch Crimson Peak.
Well, Crimson Peak is also way more cheesy and fun than this show is.
Yeah, that's the other... the Crimson Peak is this movie condensed and made by someone who had a very strong creative vision. That's what you get with Crimson Peak. I'm giving it a high witness because I teetered on it because here's another part that you'll groan. I actually had a really emotional response to the last episode, all the way up until the very end of it. So I thought the way that they handled a lot of the elements of the last episode were good. I thought there were a lot of details in the show that if it were done by like a regular network, or if it were done on maybe like Showtime, that wasn't, that wasn't Twin Peaks, the show, they would have forgotten about these things. So I thought that like going with Netflix and Paramount TV and Amblin, so that there was some sort of like unification in how the show felt outside of the first episode. Because, like, to be honest, I was sad that I never saw another split diopter shot in the entire show after that
there were
first
so
episode.
many split diopter shots in that first episode.
Dude, they were so good too. I was like, oh yeah, that Mike Flanagan action. He's breaking out all of the tools. He's breaking out his whole toolbox for this. That's why as soon as the second episode popped up and it was a different director, I was like, oh no, what am I in for? But like I didn't think the horror aspects were that good. I liked how they used the episodes, which I guess is another prestige television thing that was kind of pulled from Lost, where they would take different characters and be able to present them in different lights in each episode. So like each character had their own episode where you could both kind of relate to them, but also then in subsequent episodes you see other characters react to them and how that dynamic changes. Like that's one of those things that you can really only do in television. You can't really do it in movies that well.
Unless you want to make a really fucking long movie.
Lord of the
But I mean, I
Rings.
think the part of that is that if the things that you reveal aren't dramatically new or different every time you go, it's like Catch-22. Have you read Catch-22?
No.
So Catch-22 is like, it goes through pretty much its entire story in the first 10% of the book or so. And then every chapter after it, it's going over the same events over and over again, but from vastly different perspectives, following different characters through them, each time revealing new information and new aspects to what's going on. But the way it does that, and like the events themselves that are happening, are interesting enough, and the characters are interesting and different enough that every time you go around the circle, it feels like you're making a radical discovery, you know? You're reading over the same events over and over again, but each time you're finding out, like, your perspective is changing very dramatically. Whereas with this, it's like we're seeing the same things, you know, over and over again from new perspectives, but the new perspectives aren't very illuminating.
I don't know. I thought that they revealed new details about like the mysteries that were happening at the house. They revealed enough to keep me engaged for the next episode. I will say there were a couple of times during individual episodes where like my hand went straight to my phone and I was like, okay, what's going on here? I don't really need to know or need to care. I agree with you that the Victoria Pedretti's fiance was like, why the fuck is, like, what happened here? I also had a love-hate with Victoria Pedretti's performance in this. I haven't seen her in anything else, but she has the whiniest voice I've ever heard in my life. And like,
I haven't seen her in anything else either.
And like, you know, to her credit, she wore those 80s jeans as best as she could. But like her voice throughout the whole thing, like I think it was a good choice to go with her because it sounded like, innocent's not the right word.
I mean, it could have been like an affect or something just for the role.
Yeah, I mean, it's very possible that it was. And again, if it were the case, it worked because it made her seem both meek, but then she also portrayed a lot of strength in her character and things like that. But again, and like, again, like I said, by the end of the last episode, I was just like very emotionally wrecked. And I was like, in a way that I'm not quite sure why, but I thought go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I thought on the production side, I liked the cinematography, even though they got rid of the split diopter shots. I like a lot of the lighting, how they had a lot of bloom on the hot spots of the lights. There was a lot of detail in the soft areas. I liked the editing for the most part. They had, on those times where they had to cut on action, I thought they did a pretty good job. And like, I think this is another place that you and I are gonna disagree with. I loved all of the dramatic music, and I hated all of the horror music. And I think we're going to disagree because I think you're going to think that the music did too much of the heavy lifting, which I would agree with.
I don't really remember the music.
Oh, okay. In the 8th episode, there was that moment where there was a moment in the 8th episode where like a very dramatic, like a really ironic twist happens, and like the music is like building up and swelling up and making you feel like very hopeful, only for this thing to happen. And I was like, was the moment good, or was it just that the music in the moment and the actress was really good, looking so hopeful that this was going to happen, only to have all of the hopes dashed? So that's why I was wondering, especially in the last episode, I was like, I feel like a lot of the emotion coming from it is like a combination of like actor dedication, music, and Carla, I never know how to say her last name. Gugino. Carla, Spy Kid mom, her voiceover. Because like, this is the other thing I was going to say is I think you hated the voiceover.
I hated the voiceover.
I loved the voiceover. I knew we were going to disagree with that. As soon as you started talking about it, I was like, we're going to disagree on the voiceover, and it's going to be really easy to disagree on this. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
This gets into my issues with a lot of TV, and especially a lot of like literary TV, and also just books too, is there's a quote from Henry James, I think it's Henry James, that goes like, every love story is a ghost story. Mm-hmm. And that ended up, I think that's the title of like a biography of David Foster Wallace for some reason as well.
That would have been better if it was the title for Henry James's autobiography, I guess. Yeah. If he coined the term.
But so yeah, and this show is just it sounds like someone stumbled on that quote, and it's like, what if we made a show about this quote that was also loosely based on other Henry James shit? Because yeah, it's like this show is secretly like a weepy romantic drama, and not a horror show,
right?
And it's like it tries to be about big ideas like love and death and aging and guilt and existentialism and all this stuff, but it does it in the most like ham-fisted, first novel sort of way, where it's just like every character has a dramatic monologue where it's just 10 minutes of them chewing up scenery because it's TV, where they talk in a weirdly poetic and artificial sounding way about the themes of the show, whether it's Owen the chef eulogizing his mom, or the gardener talking about moonflowers or whatever. It's just like,
yeah, I didn't like that one.
I always hated that stuff. And then on top of that,
there's only one of them that I liked.
You have Carla Gugino's voiceover, which is also like elaborating on the themes of the show. It's and then the last episode is like, yes, there are moments in it that are genuinely touching. However, those moments are always counterbalanced by like, this is what this show is really about. It's about love, guys, and this is what it's like, and growing old and stuff. And it's like, just shut up and have the ghost kill someone, for fuck's sake, man. And it's like tries so. It's like this is the problem with so much stuff these days. Is it tries so hard to be profound, but it's just a show about some ghosts running around a big empty house. Like why can't that be enough? And the fact that ghosts are inherently have like a metaphorical quality to them be enough. Like why is that not enough? Why do you have to just hit me over the head with a brick that has like existentialist themes carved into it,
Okay, so we're going to get spoilers so that I don't have to dance around things now. Okay. My feeling on it is that I didn't really think of it as like, because there's that ending scene where adult Flora is like, I don't know why you called it a ghost story. It's really a love story, which then made me think of Crimson Peak and like, oh, this is a story with ghosts. This is not a ghost story. I was like,
Well,
but
when I heard that, I just immediately thought of that quote, every love story is a ghost story.
And then you groaned, like a deep groan.
And then I groaned. Like at the beginning, when she says, they say turn of the screw in the fucking script. And I'm like, you're already off to a bad start.
So like that part, like I didn't really give it much thought. And that's the other thing is like a lot of the existential theming and stuff like that, I didn't give it much thought. I thought a lot of those like lines, I was like, oh, that's a nice and tender line. Like, oh, that's nice. But I didn't really give it much thought because if it were a love story, granted, better than Love Actually, but like the idea that this story is a love story is a little strange to me because I think the love story that people will want to come away with is like the sort of like until near the end half-assed sort of relationship blossoming between the two lesbians.
Well, but that's the thing. It's like the show also can't figure out what it is.
Right.
Because it's the first 4 episodes, it's a spooky ghost show. The last 5 episodes, it's this existential Love Actually
everyone wants
thing.
to fuck each other. Like, yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, it's not,
yeah. So it's just like, okay, what is it? Is it a ghost story? Is it a spooky show like it is in the first 4 episodes, or is it this weepy existential romance like it is in the last 5 episodes? Pick one.
And again,
don't subvert my expectations by taking something interesting and then making it lame. Like that's a terrible way to subvert expectations.
That line in particular made me get lost flashbacks. A lot of the show gave me kind of like lost flashbacks, but in a good way. That line in particular, upon analysis, is kind of like, this is bad lost flashbacks. Yeah. But like the other thing that I absolutely hated was like, and I think you'll agree with me on this, is like as the show is ending, they start cueing in this like depressed, like this like, you know, like pop love song, depressing, as they like pan past old versions of the people and then the younger versions.
I mean, and the wedding dance is pretty cringe.
Oh, just, yeah, because it's like the worst.
So the frame story, for those of you who have not seen the show, is there's a wedding going on where the guests are a mix of British and American, and Carla Gugino is like, they're talking about like old buildings and ghosts and stuff, and Carla Gugino's like, I'll tell y'all a ghost story, and then tells the story of the show. And then at the end you find out that the wedding is between the young girl Flora and some guy, and that all of the guests, it's hi Mark, it's between her and Greg Sestero.
Yep.
Who looks like he's had some really botched plastic surgery.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I don't know what's
all of
his
the guests at the wedding
emotions.
Are the characters from the show who have survived. So Carla Gugino is the annoying like Manchester gardener. Like the gardener is just obnoxious all the time. She's like, oh yeah, I'm so tough. And I've got more of a working class accent, so that makes me sound even tougher. And Carla Gugino doesn't do that accent very well.
Oh, I thought her accent was really good.
And then she's like, I may seem like a tough, bulldyke, but I'm very philosophical and intellectual too, like a Guy Ritchie character. And so yeah, I didn't like the gardener much at all.
I liked her well enough. I didn't hate her. I liked her well enough. I liked all the characters well enough.
The problem with the gardener is that her characterization is really inconsistent, so I wasn't sure like what to think of her a lot of the time, so I ended up just kind of being annoyed. Because she does some stuff in the show, like there's moments where her character is pretty cool and interesting, and then there's other moments where you're just like, wait, this feels just weird and out of line.
Like, is there anything you can point to? Because like she kind of goes from like, I'm tough and I know everything, to like, oh, I'm a 12-year-old boy and like, it's fine that you rejected me. I'm gonna ignore you now.
Exactly, that's the thing.
That one part where like she's making out with Victoria Peretti, and like all of a sudden like the Victoria Peretti sees her like her fiance after she had just talked to the gardener about like, I have visions of my fiance and I'm haunted by him. Then she like freaks out, and instead of anyone being like, hey, are you okay? Like, was it the fiance? Like, instead of that exchange going through, it's just like everyone's butthurt and leaves.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
well, it's just,
are we in high school?
so the Gardner character is kind of initially drawn as kind of a stock type. You know, she's a gardener. She works with her hands, so metaphorically, she's close to the ground. You know, she's humble. She's a person of the earth.
Yeah.
You know, it's basically all of these symbols that in our minds would kind of characterize her as, you know, a simple, practical, down-to-earth person who's got, you know, who's not into fancy intellectual bullshit, but navigates life through toughness and just good old-fashioned common sense. Like, that's the character.
The scene with Hemingway.
Yeah, like that's the character that they draw of her at first. And then she becomes like this passive-aggressive, weepy pseudo-intellectual, which just, it's like, this is weird. I like the other Gardner better, because it's like, well, one, that's the one you established. It's like, why are you just changing her all of a sudden? I mean, maybe I think that's probably just my reading of it. I don't think, you know, I'm sure a lot of people like the Gardner character just as she is.
Yeah, I thought she was fine. I thought the actress did a good enough job. Yeah. For only being her like second like major thing. Yeah. Or second major. I think it's her second major television
it's like,
show.
I think the more they expanded the Gardner role, I think the less interesting or less likable she became.
Is that why they stopped expanding her after like the 5th episode and we're just like, you're just the fuck buddy? And then
yeah, I guess.
Because like she doesn't.
Well, and then there's like, the other thing I was going to say is like everyone at the wedding is characters from the show or you know, from the ghost story. So like the frumpy Bryant Gumbel looking guy is actually Owen the chef. You know, Miles is there. The kind of weird Derek Jacobi old man in the background is Henry Wingrave.
Yeah. They should have just put Henry Thomas in old man makeup. He was already a caricature. So, by the way, Henry Thomas looks super old now for him being like close in age. Like he was in Gangs of New York with Leonardo DiCaprio and they looked similar ages. And now like Leonardo DiCaprio looks older, but Henry Thomas looks fucking old.
Oh God, Henry Thomas is that guy? He's the guy who gets like crucified or whatever and then Leo has to shoot him?
Yep.
Fuck, I didn't make that connection at all.
Dude, I love Henry Thomas. He's in Gerald's Game as well. He's in a bunch of Mike Flanagan stuff. Like I think he does the Jack Torrance part in Doctor Sleep is what Austin was telling me, which I haven't seen Doctor Sleep, so I want to see it.
I've been wanting to see Doctor Sleep for a while, but
oh, you have you? I wonder,
question I have for you.
Yes.
Hannah Gross, the housekeeper.
Yeah.
How many episodes did it take for you to figure out she was a ghost?
I figured out she was weird after the first episode. I thought that she might have been like a creepy person, like or like a supernatural being on the first episode because she refused to drink water or anything, and they made it really obvious.
Oh yeah. So that's the thing. It's like when she's revealed to be a ghost in the 5th episode, the whole 5th episode is supposed to be a Lost style mindfuck where you're jumping around in time, and then at the end you're revealed the key piece of information that makes it all make sense. She's a ghost and she's been dead the whole time. The problem with that is that if you pay any attention at all, you first episode right away you notice, she's a little strange. Second episode, you think, or at least I thought, well, you know, this is a show about ghosts, so she's probably dead. And then I spent 3 episodes like, I think she's dead. And then the 5th episode, it's like this big reveal. She was a ghost the whole time. Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, again, I thought it was going to be something. So a lot of the twists, like, to me, in some ways, don't make sense. Or were like being manufactured for something that should have been more consistent, like should have taken on a property that was more consistent. Like she keeps, like, for example, the main character keeps seeing her dead fiance gripping to her every time she looked in the mirror. And the whole, I think the thing with, like, the lights and the glasses, like, that's when I was like, oh yeah, this does remind me of Gerald's game, because, like, there's this really big, like, spirit that hovers over everything in Gerald's game, and it's like this big lumbering mass, but you see these really white eyes inside of it.
Yeah.
So that I immediately thought of, like, oh, this is low budget Gerald's game. But well, I thought low budget, but, like, the show to me looked like they had a good budget to do a lot of things that
I
I
think
feel
they
like
did.
would have been hard to do.
Haunting of Hill House was a big hit, so I know that they wanted to make this, like, kind of a big deal. This was Netflix's Halloween production, you know?
Right. Right. This was the thing that was supposed to scare people, and it didn't scare anyone at all. It was one of the problems. They're like, oh no, this is going to be a nice, delicate, like, storybook style. It has to be scary. We're putting it out in October. But it's not. It's not scary.
I know. Yeah,
It's mildly creepy, maybe.
Mildly creepy. It's more of just like, oh, I feel bad for the lesbian couple because they didn't get to be together.
Oh, man. Oh, gosh. It wasn't even that, like, I wanted them to work. Like, I didn't care if they went to the ends of the earth or not. It's that they manufactured, and I think maybe that's what it is like, I felt so emotionally responsive because they manufactured everything so succinctly, just to make sure that me, particularly, my heartstrings were just going to be plucked. But anyway.
Well, the show felt very mechanical in the sense that, like, oh, this is the part where they pull on this heartstring. This is the reaction they're going for here. Well, about the twists, though.
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of
the
the twists and supernatural elements are good ideas. Like, the Hannah Gross, the housekeeper, being dead and a ghost the whole time is a clever idea, and I liked it conceptually. It's just they shouldn't have confirmed it until, like, the very end of the show. Like, they should have sustained that tension. Like, I'm pretty sure she's a ghost, but I'm not 100% sure. Like, they should have sustained that tension all the way to the end and then have that factor into the climax somehow. Same thing with the lead and her dead fiance. Like, that should have been sustained to the end to factor into the ending somehow. And, you know, maybe they could have just made the show shorter so that you didn't have to... Because it's hard to sustain one mystery for that long. You usually have to add on to it or augment it or close it and open up a new mystery in order to, sustain people's interest. So maybe the solution would just make the show shorter, take all of the cool, mysterious shit that you establish in the first episode and a half, and have that carry through to the end. Because it feels strange when, like, you know, you let the air out of the balloon. Okay, we know for a fact that Hannah Gross is a ghost. So now what? The rest of the show is a character drama about other ghosts?
So as far as Hannah Gross then being a ghost goes, like, to me, I'm glad you found that was clear, because to me, I was like, what am I? Because she's going back and forth in her memories so much, like, you know, like, I think I died here, but I'm not sure, but maybe I died here, but maybe I didn't, and this and that. And so, like, I personally, I mean, you know, maybe it's just because I'm, you know, a plebe, but I was like, when you saw the dead body, I was like, does this happen, like, in the future? Like, has it already happened? And if so, then we get into all sorts of weird narrative issues, because, like, the issue of her not drinking water has nothing to do with her not being able to grab a cup or drink wine or interact and hug people. So then the ghost part gets a little muddled, because it's like, well, do ghosts go through people, or are they physical beings? Like, that, like, and that part, I guess, is kind of like, okay, well, you know, then you get into the whole thing of, like, okay, we have to explain the logic of the paranormal, and we can argue about this, but, like, I felt like they did just enough explanation of the paranormal. You probably would say they should have scaled back on it some, and I would probably agree with you, because I felt like they did just enough that, like, some of this inconsistencies I ignored.
Yeah, it depends on what you mean by explanation. Like, explaining the mechanics of the paranormal world, I think they did close to the right amount. Like, they actually did a pretty good job of explaining enough but not explaining too much, I think. You know,
good. Okay, I agree with you there.
So, like, using the only two ghosts from the original story, Peter Quint and Miss Jessel, their discoveries, when they die, that they are dead and that they're trying to figure out the mechanics of the ghost world, using their kind of fish out of water experience to explain to the audience how it works, maybe could have been scaled back a little bit, or left more to implication, so that you could focus more on character stuff. But I mean, they do a good enough job, I think, of making it not feel burdensome to the story, and also making it so that their journey of figuring out, like, okay, how does Bly Manor work? How does the ghost world work? Like, what is going on? They do a good job of helping their journey tie into the broader story, because their discoveries, help the characters sort of solve the mystery at the end.
Right.
The one thing I wish the 8th episode was removed entirely. Because I don't really care about the origin story of the Lady in the Lake. I don't find her origin... Like, I don't really care to know what she's doing. And on top of that, the origin story itself is not that interesting or captivating.
Okay. I actually enjoyed it. I thought the whole concept of... But maybe I get more tied into the concept of her as far as how her power works. But go ahead. Keep going.
And also, again, I think that's the area where they explain too much. It's just... I think all of that is probably better left to the imagination. Because it's like... The Lady in the Lake works, I think, best as just this mysterious force of nature. And on top of that, the origin, like, episode 8 is not a very interesting episode. Like, the actual story behind her, being a ghost and crap isn't that interesting or entertaining to me. So it's like, one, explaining it ruins the mystery. 2, the explanation itself is not on its own a fun story. So I could have gone without that entirely.
Yeah.
Especially because, and the other thing that was also frustrating is, I think it's the end of episode 7 that, the lead actress is assaulted by the Lady in the Lake, and she's been grabbed by the throat and making, like, the most over-the-top choking faces. I mean, the fact that I have to sit through, like, 2 cold opens and closes of her going...
Yeah, and then, like, 5 minutes into the 9th episode of that, too.
It's a little irritating.
Yeah. Well, that's
because it's like one of my other issues with
Yeah.
prestige television is that they will try to sustain a cliffhanger for way too long. Because it's like, sometimes if you're structuring a series a certain way, you may run into a point where you're like, crap, we have these other plot points that we need to get in, but we don't have, like, a way to fit them in while sustaining the tension that a TV show is supposed to have. Because TV is supposed to end on a moment that's mysterious or tense, so that you want to click next episode, or so that you want to return the next week and see what's going to happen.
Right.
So it's like, how do we have these almost like non sequitur-ish exposition dumps, but still keep people interested? Play the same shot of our lead character being strangled over and over and over and over again, teasing that eventually we will resolve this. But until then, here's some exposition.
Well, also, like, an issue I had with the show was that they always played the song in the beginning of the show, but they always clearly had a moment that it was supposed to cut to the song within that first act. So that drove me really batty, because I was like, this is just bad organization. As far as the 8th episode goes, I do the ironic part was when they're lifting the chest and she's like, finally, Viola realized she was going to leave the manor with them and she could finally give her dress to her daughter, and then they throw her in the lake. Like, that was one of the most satisfying moments when I was watching this show. I thought that was so satisfying. That, and I wanted to point special merit to the fact that Viola was was Mike Flanagan's wife, like the actress.
Yeah.
And like she has this one moment where her head's back on the pillow and you just see like all 8 chins showing, and I was like, good for her for just being that committed to looking horrible in this show, because like good for her, she's braver than me. I would not want to do that. I know what you mean about the explanation, but even if they did something, because the Lady of the Lake is such a non-factor through most of the show, that it's like if they just did it's like, oh, here's your final villain that we introduced 5 minutes before the end of the movie. Like,
Yeah.
she loses a lot of impact.
Also, it's like Final Fantasy, where every Final Fantasy game, you think the villain is something, and then it's actually
It's
like
actually
the androgynous.
Ultimecia.
Well, no, you think it's like some monster or criminal or something, and then it's actually like halfway through you find out it's not the monster or criminal, it's actually the androgynous guy. And then at the very, very end, you find out it's not actually the androgynous guy. The androgynous guy was possessed by like the devil or something, so now you have to fight the devil. Yep. And that's kind of how it felt. I kind of understand how you can get that vibe from Bly Manor.
Yeah, I was about to call it Hill House. Well, the other thing is like they go through so much effort to make Peter Quint seem like maybe he's a decent guy, and then he literally just murders his girlfriend as he's a ghost. I was like, really?
Yep.
Why'd you waste all of my time with this? Like, and then you're gonna make him possess the kids so that the 2 siblings could like fuck? Like, that's horrible. I don't know.
I didn't even think about that. Jesus.
Yeah.
That's nasty.
I was about to go into some bad territory. So that's what I mean. Like, there are some inconsistencies. And, like, I think probably there's a lot of cliches in the show that... Because, like, I was like, because I did really like this. I did really like the experience of sitting down and watching it. I liked how, like, the narration made it feel more like a book being read to me. I like the fact that it was like, this is a scary thing, but it's actually not very scary. It's like not scary at all, actually. It's just like you said, it's a drama with some like jump scares, which all of the jump scares, some of them I was like, oh wow, that really caught me off guard. But most of them I was like, this is dumb. Like, just let it be creepy. And I think that was the problem, is like because in the last 5 episodes, the main character's a non-entity. Like, the au pair barely plays a role in those last 5 episodes. It's all about other people.
The last 5 episodes are all extended backstories of other characters, pretty much. Or I should say episodes 5 through 8 are extended backstories of other characters. And then what's happening right now in the story just gets abandoned. And the other thing, so that's frustrating.
Except for the Jolly Corner, number 6, where we get Smiley Henry Thomas, which, yes, was one of my favorite episodes.
But like that in and of itself is frustrating, in that like you're just dropping the story completely to then dedicate a full episode to the backstory of each of these characters. But then on top of that, it's like, okay, we have all this immense and overdrawn psychological insight into these people. What effect is that going to have on the finale? Like, how's this all going to play out in the end? The answer is it doesn't. It has no effect, and it doesn't play out in the end. It's like, cool, I know Peter Quint's backstory. He's a very complicated man and has some interesting and conflicting motivations that lead him to do questionable things. What's he going to do in the end? Nothing, apparently.
Yeah. He's going to apologize. He's going to apologize, and everything is fine. We forgive him because he apologizes to the little boy.
I didn't forgive him because he apologized. I forgave him because he finally died.
He's fucking gone.
He's gone forever. But yeah, it's just like, okay, a lot of these characters do have interesting and poignant backstories. Like I said, Peter Quint's whole scene with his mom was like genuinely very sad, and I felt really bad for his character. But it has nothing to do with anything else in the show. It's just like, this doesn't affect his behavior. This doesn't affect how he acts in the end of the show. This doesn't add any additional insight to the beginning of the show. It's like Catch-22. We get this brand new perspective that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It's
not like Catch-22.
Yeah, it's not like Catch-22. It's like Catch-22 done wrong. We get this brand new perspective.
It's the J.J. Abrams version of Catch-22.
Yeah, or like same thing with Hannah Gross. Like her will she won't she thing with Owen is like, oh, like they seem really nice together, and then it's really sad that they can't be together and stuff. And then like what effect will that have on the remaining action of the show?
Oh yeah.
It won't. Nothing happens. This whole plot line is already over.
Here's the perfect example of that.
Tenet. It's like Tenet. Robert Pattinson's like, what's happened has already happened. It's like we get all this backstory, all this elaborate backstory about these people, and then the conclusion it comes to, it's like, what has happened has already happened. Like, all the information you're getting right now is meaningless and will have no effect on what happens next.
So the perfect example of the Hannah Gross thing is when she's the start of the 9th episode and she's in the room and she's interviewing Owen for like the millionth time, and then Owen's like, do you want to save the kids or do you want to just be in this memory with me? And then she goes out into the real world and she doesn't do anything, and then she just dies and disappears.
Yep.
That's I was like, what was the big, like, was she gonna do something epic? She did nothing. She like told Henry Thomas to make sure that after Owen is done sticking his tongue down his throat to like, by the way, Hannah really loved you, Owen, and you're going to be completely like obsessed and depressed the rest of your days. Like,
dude, your Henry Thomas impression is killer.
Yes, dude. Finally, I have one. I'll add it to the archives. I'm not kidding you though. Like, as bad as his accent was, I loved it the whole way. Henry Thomas, like, he's so goofy. Even in the scenes where he's supposed to be like really dramatic with the wife and like, oh, he's having sex with his, with his brother's wife, and then he's just like, oh, but no, it doesn't. I'm not doing anything wrong. And then opposite him is an actual English guy who's speaking in a good accent. He's just like, no, yeah, you didn't think I'd notice? And it's like, notice? Of course you didn't notice. Like,
yeah, he's like, notice? What have I done? I never meant to. And then, yeah, and then his brother, who's an actual Englishman, is like, or I don't know, is he an actual Englishman?
I thought he was. He might be.
He definitely sounds like an actual Englishman because he's just like, "Oh, you're a fucking cunt, mate! Like, you fucked my wife. You'll never see her again." It's like, oh, this is what an English person actually sounds like.
Yeah,
I need to check and make sure that guy's actually.
He is English. He is English.
He is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just checked. Yeah, we're good. His accent isn't that good because he's just a really good actor. His accent's that good because he's really English. Just under the wheels fact checking. We've got this. We don't need to hire anyone to do it. God, we don't have money to do that. Sponsors, if you're out there, Netflix, please sponsor us. Actually, maybe not. Maybe it'd be bad if Netflix sponsored us because we keep looking at Netflix stuff, and I'm more on the end of like, okay, it's enjoyable enough, and you're just like, dude, I can't take much more of this shit, man.
I know. Yeah, Netflix could sponsor us just because we get the word out about all their programming, but it's not a very flattering word a lot of the time, unless it's The Five Bloods, which is genuinely a really good movie.
I was thinking about this because we were talking about Netflix not really having Netflix not being great for movies. There's a certain level of filmmaker that I think really flourishes in Netflix because Gerald's Game's really good. The Five Bloods. I really liked The Irishman. I really liked I'm Thinking of Ending Things. So there are certain filmmakers that I think are good and who do really good work. But you also get a lot of like made-for-TV Hallmark style movies, B-list romantic comedies, and I where I stand on this, where I'm like, yeah, it kind of sucks that they might do some of this stuff, but at least they're putting out mid-budget movies. At least they're willing to fund mid-budget movies. Fuck you, Bob Iger.
I think that you can kind of tell if a filmmaker is going to be good on Netflix.
Oddly,
based on if their first name is Carey and if their last name is Fukunaga.
Well,
they're going to be really good on Netflix.
Well, wait, what about Mike Flanagan? Because apparently Haunting of Hill House is really good.
Oh no, yeah, I think I have no experience with Mike Flanagan, but apparently like his stuff's really good. Which is, again, why I was a little disappointed, because I was hoping this would be
Yeah.
like, oh, this is my jumping off point into the Mike Flanagan verse, but not really.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you really liked the first episode, if you really liked how and I think he sets up a lot of stuff really well that ultimately, like, when the explanation comes down, the sacrifice, like, either the visual compromise they make or, you know, the actual way the writers constructed the explanation of the script just isn't effective. Again, my experience with Mike Flanagan is Gerald's Game and the first episode of The Haunting of Bly Manor, and, you know, reading a little bit about him on Wikipedia. So maybe I'm not the best person to talk to about this, but like, there are things that I think would have been really interesting had Mike Flanagan had control of the whole project. For example, I like the idea that the dead lady in the lake is locked in the chest, and I thought the way that they handled that visually was really interesting, where she's like literally in a room and she's trying the door, and they do that writer thing that I found was really entertaining, where they bring back the whole she sleeps, she wakes, she walks, she sleeps, she wakes. Like, I could see that being
hated
annoying
that.
for you. Yeah.
That was so annoying.
But like, I liked how they visually represented that. And then like when they open the door and she's going in and she's looking at it, and then you just see the arms come out and like strangle the person. I was like, okay, I genuinely enjoyed the way they did that. Or when what's her name, the original au pair is getting murdered is committing suicide by going underwater, and you can see the water levels rising outside of her window. Like, I thought those visuals were really cool. And like you said, a lot of the ideas I thought were really cool. Like the fact that Peter Quill, they were a little too on the nose with it, but when Peter Quill keeps going back to his
Peter
least
Quill?
favorite- yeah, Peter
Star-Lord?
Quill. Yeah. Yes, exactly. When Chris Pratt, Twitter declared worst Chris of all time, apparently. It's going.
I don't know why.
I mean, out of the 4 Chris's that they mentioned, he's okay. I'll even throw in, even including Chris O'Donnell, Chris Pratt's probably my least favorite of the Chris's, because he's just not. He doesn't take on as interesting projects as the other ones, to me.
That's true.
That's really the only reason why for me. 'Cause,
I
like,
guess that's the one knock on Chris Pratt, is he doesn't pick interesting or as interesting projects as the other ones.
yeah,
Or
like,
no. Chris Hemsworth is boring as hell. What are you talking about?
yeah,
what,
but
what interesting roles has he done?
Black Hat. I'm just kidding. I feel like
You got me there.
I have like a soft spot for Chris Hemsworth because, like, I think he has more range than Chris Pratt does. So I have a soft spot for him because, like, I do think that Chris Hemsworth has really good comedic timing in a similar way of like he can bend the line between like being very charming funny, being very stupid funny. Like, that's the reason why Thor Ragnarok works so well, isn't because it's like this grand, you know, epic, really well done superhero movie. It's really because like it's like Chris Hemsworth is able to kind of like bend the ear a little bit. I think the first Thor works better because there's just enough kind of goofy fish out of water humor that Chris Hemsworth pulls off really well. But like when I look at Chris Pratt, he just seems like he has one gear. And he's never able to compromise that one gear. Even in things like Passengers is like, you know, the one where he's supposed to be like, he's creepy in that movie. His character is creepy, but Chris Pratt as a person has this sort of like likability, like this sort of like simpleton likability about himself that anything he's cast in, he's not really going to transcend above it. Especially not now that he's gained popularity. He might have like a couple of years ago when he was really young, when he was starring in like Everwood and stuff, but to me he is not a leading man, he is a good supporting cast member. That's where he
I could see
flourishes.
that. I mean, that's all his most memorable performances are as like kind of, you know, entertaining supporting characters where he's just kind of able to be himself and doesn't have to, you know, limit what he's doing to fit a character.
Yeah, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. But like, it's like if you threw Chris Columbus on that list of like, oh, we're getting rid of, you know, you have here's a list of 6 Chris's. Chris Columbus is on the list. Okay, you know what? I'll get rid of Chris Columbus. It's fine. His contribution to the cinematic world is relatively irrelevant. So like, I feel bad because people are hounding Chris Pratt on like his politics and his religion and stuff, and it's like, no, it's just he's just not as interesting as some of these other Chris's. Yes, including Chris O'Donnell. Yes, including Chris O'Donnell. Get off of my Robin, people. Get off of him. Fucking, God, gay-coded Robin from 1995. Anyway, what were we talking about?
I'm talking about the Haunting of Bly Manor.
I know, but what part of the haunting? I took notes. Because I had some ideas that...
I mean, we were talking about the way supernatural things are represented, being locked in the chest, and...
Yeah. The Peter Quint, their representation of hell where he's in a memory that he hates. I thought that was cool.
Oh, yeah, that was neat.
I thought that was a great idea. And then they were like, why does it feel like I'm in hell, woman? And it's like, I just put that together now. I'm glad you explicitly said it to me because I wouldn't have gotten it otherwise, but...
I know.
Oh. That's we got sidetracked because of Peter Quill.
Go
ahead.
So the ending of the series is annoying, where they're at the wedding and it's playing that like sappy music.
Yes, I hated that. Yeah.
Everyone changes to their younger self. But I thought the very last
shot.
The very last shot was actually really good. It's like, oh, that's sweet.
Yeah. So, you do have a heart, Gabe. You're not the Grinch. It's been growing. Well, like I said, like the way that they layer that last episode. Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
I know. Talk about the last episode because I feel like it's going to segue perfectly into the point I was about to make anyway.
Okay. So the last episode, like from the beginning, I was kind of like, I was feeling the feels. But like when Flora sacrifices herself to save Danny, and then, Hannah doesn't do anything. But then Henry Thomas attempts to sacrifice himself to save Hannah and dies. Oh no. But if you looked at the Wikipedia page, you knew he survived. Just based off of the cast, you knew he was going to survive. But then the way that Danny saves, the au pair is named Danny. The way that Danny saves Flora by taking in the Lady of the Lake, like that kind of started getting me emotionally. But then the way that like Danny and the gardener interacted as far as like, like I'm possessed by this lady.
Oh,
I don't know how many days.
Go ahead. We should probably explain. So,
the possession.
The children are possessed by the ghosts of Miss Jessel and Peter Quint, which is alluded to in the original story, but never said outright. And they kind of go into the mechanism of how the ghosts can possess people temporarily or permanently if they're invited in. So Danny, the name of the main character that I can never remember, essentially asks the Lady of the Lake to possess her.
Yes.
And in doing so, saves the world, essentially.
Also, if you ever go back to rewatch it, you can always tell when a character is possessed because one of their eyes is a different color than the other. Just saying. They never explained that, which I liked. I started noticing it.
Yeah, that's a good thing to not explain.
It was things like that I liked. Like, oh, that's cool. Like now, if you're a nerd and go back and rewatch all of the show, you can see every time Peter Quill. You can see every time Chris Pratt possessed the little boy. Sounds bad. Gonna get canceled because of that. Shit. Fuck. Should have thought of that. But now Danny's possessed by the Lady of the Lake, and I guess that makes sense why. Because like I was explaining this to my fiance, and she was like, well, why doesn't the Lady of the Lake just leave her? And I guess she can't because they've like made this like bargain with blood or whatever with their soul, I guess.
Well, I think the Lady of the Lake's identity has been erased, so she has no like will anymore.
So she wouldn't be able to leave anyway. Like she wouldn't be able to leave the body anyway.
She doesn't. Yeah, she doesn't have the awareness to leave.
Gotcha. But the au pair and the gardener, to also quickly set this up, the au pair has a fiance, and she's known him since he was a boy. But then the au pair, Danny, starts realizing that she loves her fiance, but not like lustfully
romantically.
Loves.
Yeah.
She finds out she's a lesbian. And I like that they hinted at it a lot. Like, they never really explicitly stated it, but then it became really obvious near the end. By the end of the 4th episode, you certainly knew. But so she has this thing about the fiance, and the fiance is going to leave her. He gets out of the car, and in only Hollywood timing gets rammed over by the biggest truck you've ever seen in your entire life and like dies on the spot. And so this guy's haunting her over and over. So Danny already, I guess, has a history of seeing ghosts, because when she looks in mirrors and she looks in windows, she doesn't see her reflection. She'll either see her reflection or her reflection with a ghost. When she gets possessed by the Lady of the Lake, she starts seeing the Lady of the Lake's reflection, but not for the first 5 years. So Danny's not sure, how long it'll last, and her and the gardener start a relationship at Bly Manor, and they're like, oh, well, we'll take it one day at a time. Days turn to weeks, turn to months, turn to years. And then Danny starts seeing the reflection of the Lady of the Lake. And this is when I started getting emotional, because that's, she brings home the pathetic looking plant, but there's a ring inside the pathetic looking plant. And she's like, 1995's politics won't allow me to do things that you can do in 2008 politics. Like, let me stand on my soapbox and talk about this for a second. And they're like, well, we can't get married, but I don't need to be married. Just having the ring is enough. And you realize, like, oh, she's doing this not because, like, she genuinely loves her, but, like, she realized this is the moment that her life is going to be ending. Which I thought was, like, a very powerful moment. And again, the music is carrying you a lot, and the way that the voiceover is working, I think does a good job of sort of, like, building onto the emotion of the moment. And then she starts, like, seeing the Lady of the Lake more often, to the point where, like, she's looking in water and all she sees is the Lady of the Lake and she's about to die. And I started ramping up in emotion. And then one day she is, like, completely possessed by the Lady of the Lake, almost strangles her, her wife. And Danny wakes up, realizes that her hand is around the gardener's throat. And she's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. So then it cuts to the next morning. The gardener reads the note. The music starts to swell. They say, oh, there was a note on there, but they never say exactly what. You see the gardener crying. She flies over to Bly Manor. I feel bad for the cab driver in that situation, because, like, she gets out, she takes 3 steps towards the manor, then she turns around and runs to the lake. Like, what? If I were the cab driver, I'd be lost. She runs to the lake, jumps into the water.
Cab driver's shouting at the window. It's like, that'll be 24, 25. Don't forget, I don't take credit cards, cash only. Please don't jump in the lake with your wallet. You can't be losing all that at the bottom.
You get wet, you're not coming back in, mate. Like, oh, God. But she dives in, and, like, you just see the body of Danny floating there dead. And, like, that moment, just everything hit me. And it was just such a powerful, strong moment for me. And then it cuts back to modern time. And then things kind of start to unravel from there. But like, that was the moment that, like, that hit a very high moment. But it also it encompasses, like, everything that the series shifted towards. Because you're right, there was nothing creepy about that whole sequence. It was literally all just drama. No creepiness.
Yep. I mean, I'm glad it worked for you.
If it didn't work for you, that had to have been the longest sequence you've ever watched.
Oh, hell yeah. So, I think this conversation's been very helpful, because I think it's helped me isolate essentially, I think everything I dislike about the show can be attributable to 2 root causes.
Okay.
The first is it is too goddamn long. The show is too long. There's so much that could be removed, because there's a lot of times I felt myself sitting there just thinking to myself, just get to the fucking point. We know where this is going. Just get to the point. Like,
yeah, I'll
this
concur
last
with
episode.
That. I concur.
The last episode, it's the bulk of it is the relationship between Danny and the gardener through the years. Is they are able to have kind of a nice married, not like married, because gay marriage is illegal in the States at that time, but, like, the life of a married couple, and they're happy, and that Danny has the ghost of the Lady of the Lake inside her. Eventually it's going to possess her and drive her back into the lake, and that'll be the end. And it's like, this is going to happen, but we're just going to draw this out for, like, 40 minutes, which is,
it's 20 minutes, but yeah, it feels like about an hour and a half. If you're not feeling it, it feels like it's an hour and a half.
But whatever, man. I come from movie world, not TV world, okay?
Right,
movie
exactly.
world, it's you get to the point or you get over it, right? You can't waste 20 minutes, leading up to something that people already know is happening. So it's just like, get to the point. And like a lot of all the extended flashbacks and extensive labyrinthine, non-linear backstories of all the ghosts, I just felt myself thinking, get to the point. Like, just only show me what's going to affect the ending of this show, or what's going to affect the A story. Only show me the B story that will affect the A story. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, very little of the B story ever comes to play in the A story. So it's too long. It just needs to get to the point, and it ends up doing a lot of like dawdling and walking in circles and empty philosophizing because it's got to fill time. Yeah. There's just a lot of stuff that feels like it's trying to fill time, which is, I think, one of the last things you want to have in any piece of entertainment. You never want to feel like you never want your show to feel like the beach episode of an anime.
You don't want it to feel like last episode of Under the Wheels.
Yes.
Which,
exactly.
by the way, last episode of Under the Wheels is actually fantastically entertaining. So, like, it is not a good example of the beach episode, but
yeah,
anyway.
like you don't want your show for large sections to feel like, oh crap, we have to create filler content so the guy who writes and draws the manga all by himself can create some new content for us to adapt into a cartoon. Like, you don't want beach episodes in your show, and you don't want multiple beach episodes in your show, which is kind of how this felt. And so that's problem number one. And I think problem number two is the fact that it was made by committee. It's if you have a single overriding creative voice on a project, they will have the opportunity to inject the project with their personality and be kind of the dynamo of creative energy that everyone else working on it can draw from and get inspired by. When you have something that's made by committee, it creates a weird filter where whatever makes each contributor unique gets filtered out. And so that all that remains is kind of stuff that's produced by consensus. And that's usually stuff that's very laden with tropes, it's very predictable, and it's very mechanical. Because, if you iron out everyone's personal quirks, you only get like the most agreeable aspects of any idea. And they're usually like the least interesting aspects of any idea, especially when it comes to movies, TV, literature, or video games. I think things usually work out better when you have like when Mike Flanagan, for example, is in charge of the whole thing. He's writing and directing every single episode, and all of the other folks from production design, the actors, all the other creative people can kind of draw on him for their inspiration instead of this entire committee of people all coming to a consensus on the most bland aspects of the project.
Yeah.
So I think all my minor complaints that I enumerated at the beginning probably just come from those two things. This was made by committee, and it's too long.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, one of the things about the show that I thought was interesting was that it's not just based off of one Henry James novel. It takes, elements of different ones and tries to combine them. Every single episode is named after a different Henry James story. And now if every single episode worked that story into the framework, in sort of like the loose framework of the turn of the screw, which I think is what they were trying to do, then I think that's really cool. And I don't mind that part would be by committee. Now, granted, almost all television is by committee, so it is disappointing when the follow-up to The Haunting of Hill House, which had a singular vision, is then followed up by something where it has multiple. It's very similar, I guess, to like with True Detective, seeing season 2 and season 3, and if they ever make more of it. It's like the singular vision goes away from like a director who knows what they're doing and has control over all production value.
Yeah. Well, it's like,
and it gets distributed to different people who are still good, but don't. But it loses some of its consistency. Now, this show had a lot more consistency than other shows that I've seen, but
yeah,
I understand what you mean by like, oh well, it was written by 18 different writers, and it had a writer room, and they had to develop all of these things, and they screen it all thing. I would say though that Netflix is the least. They feel like they would be the least hands-on with a project like this, even though they're probably still like, oh, you got to be a slave to the algorithm. They still feel like they'd be the least hands-on. So there still does feel like there's some artistic merit in here. Maybe if I looked more into like behind the scenes, I could decipher whether I think there is more or if it's just cheap, lip service to it. That's the only thing I would think would change my opinion at all.
Yeah, I don't know enough about Netflix to have like an educated opinion on their role in this. I think,
It's not HBO.
Mike Flanagan is kind of a big deal now, so I almost wonder if, he's just being selective with his time and attention. He has other things he's working on that he finds more interesting than The Haunting of Bly Manor, so he didn't want to write and direct every single episode. I don't know. But whether it's Mike Flanagan or someone else, I think the show would have been better if it had like a single voice in charge. Because you're right. A lot of TV is by committee, but the great TV shows that we all remember are usually like one or a very small handful of consistent people. Whether it's the Game of Thrones was written by 2.5 people essentially. It's David Benioff, D.B. Weiss, and half of George R.R. Martin. Breaking Bad, even though I haven't seen it, it's essentially like a couple writers.
It would be an exception because there were a lot of writers, there were a lot of different directors. Rian Johnson,
Well, I know there were a lot of different directors, but wasn't Breaking Bad like essentially 2 guys who wrote the entire series?
It was probably about like 5 guys. Yeah, because one of the major writers was a woman on there. Like she wrote some of the best episodes there too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. She also wrote one of the most controversial, and Rian Johnson directed one of the most controversial. So
True Detective, one of probably
season 1, yeah.
The season 1 of True Detective, the greatest season of TV ever. The entire show was written by one person, and every single episode was directed by another person.
Did David Lynch direct every episode of the new Twin Peaks season?
Yeah,
I think he did, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right, and it's like Twin Peaks is another great example. It's like every episode was written by Mark Frost and David Lynch, and all the best episodes are the ones directed by David Lynch.
Yeah.
When David Lynch left the show, the show's quality dropped off a cliff very noticeably. Everyone figured that out right away. And then as soon as he came back, the quality shot back up again because it's his show, his and Mark Frost's show. And they're the ones who brought it to life. And it embodies a lot of their, quirks and weird ideas and personality traits that are unique to them. And that's what makes the show unique and interesting.
Yeah. No, I agree with all of that. That's also, I think, a lot of people feel that way about Bly Manor. Like, it would have been better if it were under one singular vision. And in this day and age, for a miniseries, you don't really have an excuse why you bring in alternate directors to direct episodes.
Yeah.
It's just more money that you have to spend because you have to distribute the wealth, I guess, a little bit more to like different people. You lose a singular vision. So
and you lose that consistency across episodes.
Yeah. I agree with you. I enjoyed it. It was a good jumping off point because now I'm interested in how it ties into Henry James's books. I think it reminds me of Avatar, the James Cameron movie, in that to me Avatar is a good textbook example of a movie. Like, it's not necessarily a great enjoyable movie for people to watch, but if you're teaching a class, you can basically explain everything about introduction to cinema through the movie Avatar.
Avatar is movie : the movie.
It's James Avatar, the movie, the textbook by J. Cameron et al. With an introduction by freaking Bordwell and Thompson. I feel kind of similar about The Haunting of Bly Manor. That there's a lot of aspects of television that are like, this is television. This is how you do this in television. This is
television in the 21st century, at least.
Television in the 21st, yes, yeah. Television, the revised edition, aka The Haunting of Bly Manor. So I think for those reasons, I like it as well, because it is like, oh, this is the prototypical prestige show. And unlike other Prestige shows, it's only 9 episodes. They're not going to make a sequel to it. It's a very complete package.
Yeah.
So,
one of the more interesting things about Twin Peaks, oddly enough, is that it is guilty of inventing prestige television.
Or especially like high production valued prestige television, because they had things like Hill Street Blues, which was like, all right, guys, give the camera to Michael J. Fox and let's shoot something.
Well, it's just interesting because the late 80s were the heyday of the primetime soap opera, which is the predecessor of prestige television. And then Twin Peaks came along as a parody of primetime soap operas, and as a result invented the template of prestige television. Like, a lot of the tropes that would become solidified in shows like Oz and The Sopranos, and then get further developed in like Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones and everything, were pretty much invented by Twin Peaks.
So is this a case of everyone took the wrong lessons from Twin Peaks?
I think so. What's even more fascinating is that Twin Peaks had 2 seasons in the late 80s, early 90s, making fun of the primetime soap operas that were popular at the time, and also inventing the template for prestige television that's in use to this day. Twin Peaks Season 3 is a parody of prestige TV.
So naturally everyone's going to use it as the new template for making their shows going forward.
Maybe, because it's like the part of the brilliance of Twin Peaks Season 3 is that it's in large part a giant troll job. Because it takes a lot of what we've had so many reboots, remakes, we've been inundated with prestige television. It takes everything that we've come to associate with these, all of the standard tropes, all of the fan service, all of the mysteries, J.J. Abrams, mystery box storytelling and stuff, and then just takes a giant dump on all of it. It's like, hey, remember your favorite character? Here's them now. Just kidding. Go fuck yourself. It's really good at kind of pulling apart, setting up your expectations based on this is how other prestige TV shows are, and then going nah, son, what were you thinking?
So does it, dare I use the S word on it?
It does in the most
Satisfying
David
way.
Lynch way possible.
Oh man, that's also why I'm interested in watching The Nick. I think that's what it's called. The show that Soderbergh did every single episode.
Soderbergh's hospital show?
Oh yeah, I didn't know it was a hospital show. Oh god. Well, it's Soderbergh, so fuck it, I'm in. I'd be interested in watching
it's his Victorian hospital show, if that helps.
The Nick. Isn't that star everyone's favorite sort of stiff actor, Clive Owen?
They want to take your baby.
Yes, it does.
Gemini Man is on Amazon Prime, and Gemini Man has everything that I love about Clive Owen's stiff acting is amplified in that. He's supposed to be American, so of course he doesn't sound American at all.
I can't believe you guys fucked this up. That's it. I'm bringing in Gemini.
Whenever I hear Clive
clearly
Owen,
American guy.
My image of Clive Owen, it's just him saying,
Look at what they make you give.
and then him also saying,
They want to take your baby.
that's all I can remember of him. Just those two things are Clive Owen in my mind.
Clive Owen, the hairstyle he has in Sin City is the hairstyle he has in every fucking movie. He made I don't need hair and makeup into a thing for an actor. No one touches anything on his face, which is why every year he looks more and more puffy and old. God damn it if I don't love Clive Owen. I don't think Clive Owen as a good actor though. I think that's the problem is people are yeah, Clive Owen. I'm oh good. I'm in for a ham fest now. Throw in some Kenneth Branagh, throw in some Clive Owen. Who else do we need in here? Sean Bean dying? Okay, yeah, good to go. Do you have anything else to add about The Haunting of Bly Manor?
Not really. It's okay.
I'm glad we were able to exorcise your demons on the show, though.
I mean, that if we were reviewing The Exorcist, that would be a better tie-in.
It would. I think that line's gonna haunt me for, the next couple days.
Hey!
I'm Matthew.
I'm Gabe.
And you've just been under the wheels.
All right, have fun. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Are you gonna watch anything scary for Halloween, or are you going to a party?
I haven't been invited to any parties, so because there probably aren't any parties. I'm probably just gonna stay home and watch scary movies.
Or you can watch you can watch The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which serves as both a scary movie and a Sean Connery movie.
I thought you were gonna say Dragonheart because that movie is scary.
It's scary because of Dennis Quaid's horrible Scottish accent.
No Scottish accent could be scarier than frickin' Highlander.
That's true. At least Dennis Quaid has the signature triangle smile. And David Thewlis is in it, and David Thewlis is always fun to watch, even when
David
he's
Thewlis is
terrible.
great.
I love David Thewlis. Maybe one day we'll watch The Island of Dr. Moreau with Val Kilmer, fat, heavy Godfather guy, Marlon Brando, and David Thewlis one day.
I like how you forgot the name of the greatest actor who ever lived.
Arguably. I have watched The Score, okay? Marlon Brando sitting in a bathtub talking to Robert De Niro should have been better. I'm just saying, Frank Oz, do better next time.
Marlon Brando is the only actor who could deliver Oscar-worthy performances while also not knowing his lines. Like, he didn't know what his lines were. He just had them fed to him in an earpiece and, like, made it turned it into magic.
Oh, right.
That's why he's the greatest actor ever.
I was going to say, wait, which Marlon Brando performance are you talking about? The Godfather, Last Tango in Paris?
All of them where he didn't know his lines.
Dude, he couldn't memorize lines from like 1960 on. I'm pretty sure, because he was kryptonite in the late 60s and the 70s. Like, he couldn't buy a role. Yeah.
Well, and also it's just like in Apocalypse Now, he wrote his lines all over the set. Mm-hmm. And like all of his wistful existential searching is really him being like, where the fuck is my next line?
The scene I've seen the scene in Last Tango in Paris where he's like monologuing next to the woman, and he's like, his eyes are like going back and forth, and like that sort of like dramatic, oh, my eyes are gonna tear up as he's like reading. He's not acting, he's reading cue cards. He's reading fucking cue cards. Let's give him an Academy Award. But I think they give him an Academy Award for the rape. He delivers
Academy Award-winning performances reading cue cards. Who else can do that? No one.
My wife was crying in the other room, and nobody will talk to me. Consigliere, please talk to me, Consigliere.
He can win an Academy Award while not being able to understand a single fucking thing he says.
It's insane.
And still, he's not my favorite actor. He's good. He's amazing.
I think he's the best actor ever. Like, if you take into account the quality of the product and the degree of difficulty, he's the greatest actor of all time.
If Tom Hardy
imagine how far into the role Daniel Day-Lewis goes. Like, he not only memorizes the script, he spends years creating entire universes around these characters so he can inhabit them completely. And then Marlon Brando's like just reading an index card for the very first time and winning Academy Award.
Did you? So Francis Ford Coppola tells this story about like he meets with Marlon Brando to offer him the role of Vito, and he's like, and I put some Italian meats and some things around to help him kind of get into character, and like he's like, yeah, and you just see Marlon Brando like he takes some of the food and he stuffs it in his cheeks, and he like and then he like takes his hair and pulls it in a ponytail in the back, and like his eyes slant a little bit, and he's like,
then he's like starting to become the Godfather in front of his hairy eyes.
and like I hear that story, and I'm like, my God, like the man is fucking incredible.
Yep.
But still not my favorite actor.
But like, isn't that insane? You know, he's trying to offer him the role of a lifetime, and Marlon Brando's idea is like, I'm just gonna make a funny face, and then he's the guy, he's the character.
I'm gonna make a funny face and talk through really awkward mouth prosthetics. It didn't work for Jack Nicholson as the Joker, but it worked for Marlon Brando. All right, man. Hey, have a good happy Halloween, sir.
You too.
Finished.